The aim of this lecture is to discuss energy policy in the context of African outreach countries. After this lecture, you will be aware of some of the specific policy challenges and opportunities related to the energy markets in the African continent. Developing countries still need increasing amounts of energy to sustain their development process. Currently, more than 1 billion people worldwide, 14% of the global population, has no access to electricity. The International Energy Agency estimates that primary energy demand will increase substantially in the developing world. In Africa alone, by 2040, the demand for power is expected to rise by almost 500 million tons of oil equivalent. The UN Sustainable Development Goals clearly identify energy access as the one fundamental objective for development. The seventh goal explicitly mentions affordable and clean energy, while other goals, such as sustainable cities and climate action, emphasize indirectly the need to implement effective and green energy systems. The current situation of African energy markets is the following. Energy demand grows at 3.5% per annum, much faster than the global average, 1.3% per annum, and also faster than the period between 1990 and 2016, 2.7% per annum. This reflects increasing level of industrialization and productivity. Regional consumption remains heavily dominated by oil, 44% of the total, gas, 27%, and coal, 21%. Hydroelectric power accounts for 6%, while nuclear and renewables combined only represents 2% of the total. Africa's CO2 emissions from energy use are quite limited, but increased by 1.9% in 2017. The region accounts for a small fraction of global emissions, 3.6%. The African continent, and particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, is one of the most energy-poor regions in the world. The World Bank Regulatory Indicators for Sustainable Energy, RISE, highlights the heterogeneity in electricity access depending on the African country. According to the RISE indicators, most countries in Sub-Saharan Africa have highly inefficient energy systems with high transmission and distribution losses. From this map, you can see also that renewable energy use is still limited in the region. The African continent faces some specific challenges. First of all, the growing population in most of its countries often exceeds electrification rates. This problem is exacerbated by urban-rural disparities that are likely to grow in the future as more people migrate to the larger cities. In rural areas, traditional cooking fuels from traditional biomass, that is, firewood or charcoal, are still the main sources of heat, but they are low efficient and generates indoor pollution. Last but not least, there are insufficient and unreliable infrastructure that generate an expensive power access to households, industries, and public institutions like hospitals and schools. More than 600 million people lack access to electricity in Africa, according to the IAE Energy Outlook for the continent. The unlikely irony of the energy poverty in this region is that Africa is rich in energy resources, thanks to an exceptional wealth of both fossil fuels and renewable energy. Most of its potential is unexploited yet. This situation demands substantial policy efforts to ensure power access for everyone in the form of sustainable, affordable, reliable, and modern energy. For example, as one of the sunniest regions on Earth, Africa has an exceptional potential in terms of annual kilowatt production from solar energy. This map shows the estimated photovoltaic potential of the continent, which is highest especially in Sahara Desert, the Namib Desert, and the East African Rift. Studies have shown that rapid technological changes in decentralized renewable technologies like photovoltaic could provide an important opportunity to leapfrog standard energy infrastructures. This could be the most effective strategy to reach remote rural areas. These maps show the competitiveness of the least cost rural electrification options. The centralized networks like photovoltaic mini-grids are rapidly becoming more competitive. Unfortunately, so far there has been limited investments in mini-grids. Tanzania is one noticeable exception, and countries like Nigeria and Rwanda have been undertaking regulatory reforms to lower barriers to mini-grid investments, but much more is needed to encourage these investments. Energy policies for sustainable development require a multidimensional approach. They must tackle regulation, as discussed in the previous lectures, but also encourage investments and technological advancements in the generation, distribution, transmissions, and storage. This requires coordination between governments, private investments, and international organizations like the World Bank groups that finances these types of activities. Furthermore, energy policy should look beyond the national level policy and consider regional initiatives such as MedReg or Energy Community that can foster permanent regulatory environments and the harmonization of electricity markets and reduce costs for energy users. In conclusion, encouraging investments in the energy sector is one of the key policies that African governments can do to improve energy services. This requires reducing investors' risk arising, for example, from macroeconomic or political instability and from weak protection of contract and property rights. But it also requires specific utility sector reforms. In most countries, in sub-Saharan Africa, in fact, power utilities are not financially sustainable. A recent study by Kojima and Trimble in 2016 finds that only the utilities of Seychelles and Uganda fully covered operational and capital expenditures. Furthermore, governments should create robust and independent regulatory bodies empowered to hold utilities. Finally, for some African countries, it's particularly urgent to consider energy subsidies reforms, which usually favor fossil fuels and redistribute wealth in a non-progressive way.